MSI's GS66 is a thinner, stealthy, all-black laptop that can both play games but also has a clean design and will fit right in an office. My GS66 has a 12th gen Intel Core i9 processor, NVIDIA RTX 3070 Ti graphics, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, and a 15.6-inch screen. This configuration sits in between the lower tier RTX 3060 and higher tier RTX 3080 Ti options, and you can check them all out as well as current prices with those links below the video. The GS66 is available in MSI's core black finish. The lid, interior, and bottom panels are all metal, and while the build quality feels decent, make no mistake, it can't compete with Razer's Blade 15. But the blade costs quite a bit more too. The black finish is a massive fingerprint magnet anywhere you lightly touch, but I found it fairly easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. There's a subtle indent along the whole front edge which makes it easy to open the lid, and it goes the full 180 degrees back for sharing. There's a little flex to the metal lid, but it's sturdier compared to their larger GS77. There was a tiny bit of screen wobble when typing aggressively, but it's fine. The hinges feel smooth and fairly sturdy, but without long-term testing, it's hard for me to know if they'll have similar issues to past MSI laptops. There's a bit more flex to the keyboard area compared to the larger GS77. The smaller 66 is also a fair bit lighter, so perhaps less materials. But I never found this to be an issue during normal use. The laptop alone weighs 2.2 kilos or 4.9 pounds, then just under 3 kilos or 6.5 pounds with a 240 watt power brick and cables for charging. Just like the stealth name implies, the GS77 is on the smaller and thinner side for a 15-inch gaming laptop. It's quite portable. The GS66 has a 15.6-inch screen and is available with different high refresh 1080p, 1440p, or 4K options. For some reason, mine has a 4K 60Hz panel that's not listed here. Obviously for gaming, that doesn't make much sense. 4K at 15 inches isn't really worthwhile unless you're doing something like content creation. At this smaller size, honestly, I think something like a 1080p or 1440p high refresh screen would be a better option for most people. The GS66 has a MUX Switch, so it's possible to disable the integrated graphics to get a speed boost in games, but at the expense of worse battery life. Unfortunately, there's no advanced Optimus, so it needs a manual reboot to swap, and there's no G-Sync, at least with my 4K 60Hz panel. I expected it to have adaptive sync with Optimus enabled, but couldn't find that listed anywhere through the Intel software. My 4K 60Hz screen has excellent color gamut and good contrast, so probably decent for a creator, granted it is 8-bit. The brightness gets up to 420 nits at maximum, so it's fairly bright too. But of course, expect different results with different screen options. Obviously, with a 4K 60Hz panel, we're not expecting great response times. I really wish MSI sent one with a better screen for gamers, but here are my results for completeness. It's not amazing compared to others. Not the best 60Hz screen I've tested, but also not the worst either. There are a number of high refresh 4K panels that are considerably better, so we can't just blame the resolution, it's the specific panel choice. Basically, I'd expect much better results with any other screen option on this laptop. The total system latency is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fires on the screen in CSGO. The slower screen is definitely contributing to a slower result here, but given the HP Victus had a faster response time and faster 144Hz screen, it just goes to show that there's more to total latency than panel choice. Backlight bleed was only minor. I never noticed any problems during normal use, but this will vary between laptops. There's a 720p camera above the screen in the middle, and it has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock. This is what the camera and microphone look and sound like, and this is what it sounds like while typing on the keyboard. The GS66 has a per-key RGB backlit keyboard, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. Brightness can be adjusted between 4 levels by using the F10 and F11 shortcuts. Typing was alright, though the key presses felt a little shallow to me, and the small right shift might annoy some. Although the power button is part of the keyboard and right next to the delete key, an accidental press doesn't do anything. You need to hold it for a long time before Windows prompts you to shut down. The large touchpad is smooth to the touch and works alright. I'm not usually a fan of these super wide touchpads, but my hands don't rest on it when typing, and it's making good use of the available space. There's not much touchpad room because of the holes for airflow above the keyboard. That just pushes everything down a bit. There's also a fingerprint scanner inside the touchpad on the top left corner. It worked fine, but personally, I prefer larger scanners like the one on MSI's bigger GS77. The smaller rectangle on the GS66 just gives you a smaller target to aim for. There are front-facing speakers near the left and right corners. My hands don't cover them when resting comfortably on the machine, but it's not impossible if I'm moving. The speakers definitely aren't as good compared to MSI's larger GS77, but that has subs while the 66 does not. There's a little bass, but at higher volume they're not very clear and there's some palm rest vibration. The Latencymon results are looking pretty terrible. The left side from the back has an air exhaust vent, the power input, USB Type-C port with Thunderbolt 4 support, HDMI output, and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A port. The right from the front has a 3.5mm audio combo jack, two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C ports, though neither of these offer Thunderbolt support, a second USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A port, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port facing the preferred way so you don't have to lift the machine to unplug, and there's an air exhaust on this side too. There aren't any ports on the back, just more air exhaust vents towards the left and right corners. All three of those Type-C ports offer DisplayPort support. The two on the left connect directly to the NVIDIA graphics, while the Thunderbolt 4 port on the left connects to the Intel integrated graphics, but only with Optimus enabled. If you turn Optimus off with the MUX Switch, then you can't use the Thunderbolt 4 port to run an external screen at all. But only that left port can be used to charge the laptop. The HDMI port also connects directly to the NVIDIA graphics, so that along with the two Type-C ports can be used for VR. And we also confirmed that the HDMI port supports an external 4K screen at 120Hz 8-bit with G-Sync, so variable refresh rate. There are 9 Phillips head screws to get inside, only the one in the middle down the front is shorter than the rest. I found it fairly easy to pry open using the tools which I'll link below the video. Inside we've got the large battery down the front, 2 M.2 storage slots just above it, 2 memory slots in the middle, and a Wi-Fi 6E card to the left of those. Wi-Fi performance was alright, but not as good compared to most other Intel or killer options that I've tested, but still better than the laptops with MediaTek or Realtek chips. The upgradeability score was decent, as unlike some other thinner MSI laptops, the motherboard isn't flipped upside down. The laptop was easy enough to open, and once inside, we're able to upgrade quite a bit. The GS66 is powered by a 4-cell 99.9 Wh battery, the biggest size legally allowed on a plane. As expected, running on battery power with Optimus disabled results in less runtime because the NVIDIA graphics are more power hungry compared to the Intel integrated graphics. With Optimus on though, it's doing quite well compared to most other Intel-based gaming laptops. Sure, it's got the largest possible battery, but there are a number of others that have the same sized battery that couldn't last as long. Generally, AMD Ryzen-based options seem to run longer than Intel laptops according to this data, but at almost 6 hours in my YouTube playback test, there aren't many 12th gen options that do better than the GS66. Let's check out thermals next. There are a few heat pipes shared between the CPU and GPU, and we've got 3 fans, a little unusual as most gaming laptops have 2. Cool air comes in underneath, and there are plenty of holes for airflow directly above the intake fans. Based on the holes above the keyboard, it probably comes through here too. Hot air then gets exhausted out of both sides and out the back vents. The MSI Center software lets us change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are silent, balanced, and extreme performance. Extreme performance mode optionally lets you overclock the GPU. The first time you go in here, there's no GPU overclock applied, but if you click default, it boosts the GPU core up to 100 MHz. So not really a good default if you have to manually go and click the default button first. Extreme mode also lets you enable cooler boost, which sets the fans to maximum, but you can also go to advanced mode to customize either fan individually. It's not quite as granular as a regular fan curve, but it's something. You can also enable max fans at any time regardless of the performance mode selected with the F8 shortcut key. The temperatures were cold at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst case full load scenario. Most applications don't fully load both the CPU and GPU at the same time like this. Silent mode was thermal throttling on the GPU, but the fans are quieter. It's a trade-off. Balanced mode was a little cooler, while extreme mode was about the same. If we set the fans to full speed, we're able to get a nice dip in temperatures. However, if we use the cooling pad that I've got linked below the video, things actually get warmer to the point where the CPU thermal throttles. These are the clock speeds for the same tests just shown. The clock speeds get progressively higher as we move up to higher performance modes and improve cooling. Adding the cooling pad gets us more than a 500 MHz boost on the 6P cores and 400 MHz to the 8E cores. So the cooling pad allows us to reach higher levels of performance, hence the higher temperatures. We can see this when looking at the power levels being reached. Balanced mode seems to run the GPU at 80 watts when the CPU is under load at 45 watts. Extreme mode appears to take a little power from the GPU and give it to the CPU, and then things start to get interesting once we max out the fans. Although we're averaging about 59 watts on the CPU long term, it was actually bouncing between 45 and 88. Basically, every few minutes it would boost up, hit thermal throttling, then drop back down. It kept doing this, but only with the fans maxed out. Adding the cooling pad allowed it to stabilize, which is why the CPU power limit was close to 85. Extremely high in a CPU plus GPU workload. But we can see this comes at the expense of some GPU power, as the 3070 Ti is now running closer to 70 watts. This is lower than the 80 watt minimum listed on Nvidia's spec sheet. So for whatever reason, MSI seems to prioritize CPU power over GPU power when both are loaded up at the same time. Though this only happens if you actively improve the cooling, either through increasing the fan speed or adding a cooling pad. It's a bit different in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench. PL1 initially gets set to 90 watts in extreme performance mode, but after a few minutes, it drops down a little to 85 or 87 watts. It seems to dynamically change to avoid thermal throttling. The GS66 is doing quite well compared to most other laptops, especially when we consider that the three machines ahead of it are all thicker. Granted, the Zephyrus M16 isn't much bigger. I found it interesting that the GS66 was outperforming MSI's larger GS77 here, given you'd think the GS77 has more space for cooling, but it was hitting thermal limits and lower maximum TDP as a result. The performance drops back when we unplug the charger and instead run purely off of battery power, but the GS66 is still one of the higher results. Now, that said, it is worth noting that there are now 8-core 16-thread Ryzen options that are able to score higher in multi-core, which is kind of impressive considering the 12th gen Intel options are 14-core 20-thread chips. Intel still clearly has the lead when it comes to single-core performance though, whether on or off battery. It's very cool when just sitting there idle. Most laptops are around 30 degrees Celsius, but as you'll hear soon, the fans are active even when it's not doing anything. It gets warmer with the stress tests going, and the WASD area wasn't too comfortable, which I found interesting because others like ASUS laptops bring air through the keyboard to avoid this. Balanced mode felt a bit cooler though because the fan speed increases. Extreme mode wasn't too different, though WASD is still fairly warm, but not hot in this worst case stress test. Setting the fans to full speed cools things down significantly, but as you'll hear next, this is also quite loud. The fans were audible when just sitting there idle doing nothing in silent mode, but at least they weren't constantly ramping up and down like the larger GS77. Interestingly, the fan noise didn't really change in silent mode from idle to when we run the stress tests, so it's no surprise we saw thermal throttling there. Even extreme mode with the fans on auto was quieter compared to most gaming laptops I test in their highest mode. However, maxing the fan out could make it quite loud. I'd definitely want headphones there. Now let's find find out how MSI's GS66 actually performs in games and compares against other laptops. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested the same on all laptops, and I've got the GS77 shown by the red highlight. It's basically performing the same as Razer's Blade 15, despite that having a higher tier RTX 3080 Ti with double the VRAM and slightly higher power limit. That's also putting aside that it costs over $1,000 more as well. We've got a different selection of laptops at the higher 1440p resolution, as we only test machines that actually have a chance of running it. The Blade 15 was able to come out ahead now, so perhaps the 3080 Ti can do better at higher resolutions. But at the same time, we're talking less than a 2 FPS difference. Nothing significant considering the price gap. Control is a fairly GPU-heavy game, and although the Blade 15 does have a higher tier GPU, it was only slightly ahead of the GS66 this time. Even last year's lower spec Xenia 15 was quite close, and that's another slimmer 15-inch design too. At 1440p, the GS66 is now our lowest RTX 3070 Ti result. However, the Zephyrus M16 just above it is very close despite having a higher GPU power limit. Razer's Blade 15 is ahead again here, but with another tiny lead, it really makes you question whether an RTX 3080 Ti is worth wasting money on in a thinner and lighter design. Red Dead Redemption 2 was tested with the game's benchmark tool. I've found that AMD's Radeon GPUs typically do better than Nvidia in this test. This would explain why the RX 6700M in MSI's Delta 15 from last year was reaching about the same average FPS. At 1440p, MSI's larger GS77 with higher tier RTX 3080 Ti was performing about the same as the smaller GS66. So yet another example of why a lower wattage 3080 Ti probably isn't worth spending more money on, at least at 1080p and 1440p resolutions. The GS77 doesn't have a MUX Switch for some reason, but I doubt that matters a whole lot at this higher resolution. Here are the 3D Mark results for those that find them useful. Now for some content creator tests. Adobe Premiere was tested with the Puget Systems benchmark, and MSI's GS66 is one of the better results. I suspect this is due to the high CPU power limit that's possible at the expense of GPU power, as that would help here. The GS66 was also doing great in Adobe Photoshop, only being beaten by MSI's larger GS77 with higher tier 3080 Ti. I've found this test to depend on single-core performance, which is why there are a bunch of i9 laptops near the top. DaVinci Resolve still cares about CPU performance, but GPU matters more here, which is why the lower wattage 3070 Ti is now being beaten by higher wattage options, despite many of these being paired with lower tier i7 processors. We've also tested SpecViewPerf, which tests out various professional 3D workloads. Intel 12th Gen supports faster PCIe Gen 4 storage, and the read and write speeds from the installed 1TB SSD are excellent. Just like pretty much every other MSI gaming laptop, you've got the option of pressing this epic cheat code to unlock the advanced BIOS. This is a tweaker's dream. You can change pretty much anything here, from power to thermal limits and way more. So make sure you know what you're doing or you risk bricking the machine. Linux support was tested with Ubuntu 22.04. By default out of the box, the keyboard, touchpad, speakers, Ethernet, and camera all worked. The keyboard shortcuts for volume adjustment and keyboard brightness still worked, as well as the button to instantly max out the fan. However, screen brightness shortcuts did not work. Wi-Fi didn't work out of the box, despite the latest Ubuntu coming with kernel version 5.15. Let's discuss pricing and availability next. This will of course change over time, so refer to those links below the video for updates. At the time of recording, the GS66 seems to start at around $1,900 for an RTX 3060 configuration. Now that does sound a bit pricey for 3060 tier performance, but we've got to consider the competition. As far as slim, stealthy, black gaming laptops go, there's really only Razer's Blade 15, and with an RTX 3060 that starts at $2,500, so $600 more than the GS66. The 3070 Ti version of GS66, like I've tested here, starts at $2,250 at the moment. And again, compared to Razer's Blade 15, which starts at $3,000 for the 3070 tier, well, the GS66 is looking like a deal comparatively. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that the Blade 15 is a better gaming laptop compared to the GS66, but it also costs quite a lot more too. You definitely get more bang for buck with the GS66 if you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles. But let me know if you'd be interested in a dedicated comparison between those two laptops. Apart from those two, there just aren't a whole lot of thin, stealthy, black gaming laptops out there. But yeah, MSI's GS66 is definitely the cheaper of the two. Now, if thinner, stealthy, all-black gaming laptops are what you're after, but maybe you want a larger 17-inch screen, then check out my review of MSI's larger GS77 over here next. Despite being bigger and having higher tier specs, it's not always better than the GS66, and you'll see why in that video.